Welcome back to another Post Media One-on-One. I'm Bruce Garrioch, pleased to be joined today by former Senators defenseman and TSN analyst Marc Methot. And Marc, as we speak today, the Ottawa Senators are 10-12-2, sitting 5 points out of a playoff spot, and haven't gotten off to the kind of start anybody expected. Coming off a 1-1-1 California road trip, begin a 4-game homestand that I discussed with you before we went on, that I think is a tipping point for the season. How are your feelings on this team right now?
Bruce, first of all, thank you for having me on today. I'm jaded. I think, when we talked a little bit before we came on here, where we kind of go through these exercises like, okay, so, these next 4 games, they're playing Detroit, Nashville, Islanders, Ducks at home. It's a homestand. Is this a critical part of the season? It's like, or is this the make or break point?
Yeah.
I think we're past that now. I do. I mean, sure, they could string together 3 wins here, but just with the way they've been playing, some of the injuries they've had now, particularly obviously Artem Zub not out, the newer guys that were brought in over the summer have been underwhelming. I'm as a fan, I want to maintain hope. I'm an alumni guy. Everyone I know in around Ottawa wants the team to do well, obviously. But I think I'm at a point now, Bruce, where I'm like, okay, like I'm going to be working Thursday night's game, for example. I'm going to be there. And it's like, what do you start? What's the talking point? Well, we can talk about the team looking for confidence and using all these fun buzzwords, but ultimately it doesn't matter what the underlying numbers are. It doesn't matter how they did in October. What matters is that they're losing more games than they're winning right now. And, they're a little beat up. And I'm at a point now where I don't even know how to break this team down anymore, Bruce.
Well, and it's interesting you say that because I think part of the problem, and maybe is Travis Green feels he's only 24 games into it. The problem he's facing is he's surrounded by a bunch of people who've seen this movie before. And I guess is winning a mindset? Is it a mentality? Has this group lost so much that they don't know how to win? I think these are some of the questions probably ask myself more than ask them, but we've seen nothing to suggest that these guys are going to win 5 in a row anytime soon.
Exactly. You just said it right there. It's we can have all these hopes that the team's going to do very well. And I mean, I hope they do turn it around because it gives you and I more to talk about, right? Like we enjoy it when the team does well. We don't pounce on this team when they're losing because it turns into this kind of conversation where nobody really has an answer. But to get to the point, I mean, you kind of laid it out really well right now. We're set. The team is 7th in the division right now in the Atlantic. There are 3 points, I believe, ahead of Montreal at the moment. Like they're not in a good position at all.
Oh.
So, and we talked about the dreaded month of November and what they needed to avoid, to get through that. And they obviously have not met that expectation as well. And now you're sitting at a point where you've got 58 games left and you're scratching your head in the month of November. I should say we're now in December, but now we're all scratching our heads thinking, okay, well, what do they need to do to find that consistency again? Right. And I'm not sure finding a top 4 defenseman, like 99% of the NHL is currently trying to do as well. I'm not sure that moves the needle as much as we may think it does. It certainly may wake up the team. You make a splash, teams, the players, the dynamic in the room changes a little bit. And now all of a sudden there's new life, maybe. But I think when you're looking at the makeup of a very good team, I like to use teams like Florida's a good example, right? I mean, they've been sort of, before they won the cup, they were scratching the surface. They were in contention year after year. They're kind of back there again where, they're having another strong year. That's the model that you want the Ottawa Senators to follow. And it's not just them. There are plenty of other examples. I'm just trying to think of something recent. But, you finally build up this core where you can deliver with that core, and then you start insulating that core with other key pieces. We saw Ottawa attempt to do that over the summer, right? You bring in Cousins, Perron, Amadio, you bring in Ullmark, and you think, okay, you've got your core in place. Now we're going to bring in these other guys that have got some championship pedigree. And here we are at the end of, well, I should say the start of December, and nothing's really changed. The team's still in
No.
the same spot. So again, it's like, yeah, sure, I'm a former player, and I like to think I understand the game very well. But I'm at a point now, Bruce, where I'm like, I'm looking at some of these guys that are struggling. Like we talked, well, we haven't spoken on him yet, but Jake Sanderson's a good example. His game was excellent up until Artem Zub gets hurt. Now all of a sudden he's finding it. He's trying to find it again, and he's sort of lost. He's in this weird purgatory, and I'm not just going to blame Hamonic for that. It's obviously the onus is obviously on the player as well. But you're getting all kinds of performances similar to Sanderson right now, where some of the guys aren't pulling their weight. Then the odd night they come up big, but everybody else is sort of dragging their feet. So you're never getting a collective, like buy-in from the entire group. And then when the forwards and the defensemen are playing well, then you've got Ullmark that lets in a couple soft goals. So again, it's trying to bring it in together, at the same time on any given night. And I find they're not able to do it right now. And that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. And you've touched on two things. Were you ever part of a team that had and it doesn't have to be in Ottawa, Mark, that had a significant in-season trade? Because one of the things you've heard, certainly, and one of the things I know is that Steve Staios has certainly floated Josh Norris's name to other teams. Certainly, he's interested in moving Josh Norris. That is a name. If you're going to take a stab at the core, then I think Josh Norris is part of the core. Were you on a team that had a significant in-season trade? Or I guess ultimately what I'm trying to get at by asking that question is, what kind of effect would that have?
Yeah. Well, I've played on teams that have made moves. Sure, nothing super significant. And when we did have some significant moves, we were still bad after the fact. And I'm referring back to my Columbus days. So I remember we acquired Jeff Carter. That was when Philly offloaded Mike Richards and Jeff Carter right around the same time. And they were both very close with each other. And then, so Richards ended up going to LA, and then Carter, I think, wanted to follow him there, but Columbus swept in and grabbed him. And he was very unhappy in Columbus. Finally shows up for a random game when he found out, well, I shouldn't say it like that, but this one game in Columbus, it was a home game. And the word was out that every scout you could think of was in the building. Well, of course, Jeff Carter puts up 3 goals, gets a hat trick, gets traded the next day, ends up in LA with his buddy. So I've never been on the end where they've made a move and it's benefited our group. And that kind of touches on what I mentioned earlier. It's just because you're going to bring in another player doesn't mean it changes the dynamic of the team. And then again, I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, you go out and you make a move. Sure, that's great. But then what are you giving up? And so, is it off the
Careful
move?
What you wish for.
Well, exactly. So the grass won't always be greener, and now you're also screwing around with the chemistry a little bit in the locker room, right? So, I think I'll finish my point with help isn't necessarily on the way. I think this team is beyond that point now. I mean, you could have made that argument a couple of years ago when the core was still growing together and they were still a relatively young team. But I mean, I think excuses have to be taken off the table. I think it's the onus is on the players, on the individuals in that locker room. And you saw it the other night where Brady, he steps up his game in that Ducks game, right? And it's emotional. He gets a couple goals, but they still lose. So there's something off with the mixture right now. I do feel sorry for Steve Staios and Travis Green, and I'm not trying to carry water for them. They're new to this team and they're starting to really get sort of a taste of what it's like to be involved with the Ottawa Senators in the last 7 years, and they're certainly no exception. But Bruce, I don't have an answer. It's finding consistency, and some evenings the PP's doing well, but the PK's struggling, and vice versa. So I don't know what you do now.
One of the things that I wonder about, and I'm wondering what you think, is I've been, I'll put it this way, I've been disappointed in Linus Ullmark. I don't think that he has been what we expected. I think I don't, I always use this line, he doesn't have to be a savior, he just has to make saves.
Yeah.
I don't think he's been either. I think I counted at, our friend Jeff Mock at TSN sent me something midway through November. He sent me a stat that the Senators only had two, at that time, the Senators only had 2 games where their goalies had over a 900 save percentage, and both of those were shutouts. I think that in November, Allmark had 4 games where he had a save percentage over 900. It's not going to do it, Mark.
No, I know.
And I know they're not good, not very good defensively, but he needs to be Linus Allmark, the Vezina Trophy champion, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Not Linus Allmark, the okay goalie.
Well, and it's all connected, right? But your assessment's spot on. I think people are lying to themselves if they think that he's playing well right now. I can't think of too many people that are actually, supporting that theory. But defensively, when you look at the group right now, they're very thin. I mean, let's just call it as it is. I mean, even with Zoom in the lineup, it's not great. I don't know that it's quite playoff caliber. It's close to it, but with Zub out or any top 4 defensemen out of the lineup, oh boy. And now you've got Hamonic on the top pairing with Sanderson, which is, I mean, I'm not going to go there anymore, but to focus in on the goaltending right now, sure. Would it be nice to have had Allmark steal a couple games here and there, which is essentially what you're doing when you're bringing a Vezina type goaltender, right? Your guy, you're bringing him in to sort of lay some cover fire for the rest of the group when they're not performing up to their standard, right? So, the hope is the goaltender is going to steal some games. But Bruce, I don't know that it's a mental thing with him. Like he doesn't seem mentally weak to me. And when I say that, I meant with referring to hockey, of course, in the game. And it doesn't seem like he's the kind of guy that gets down on himself too much. But again, like my experience observing him is limited. I mean, I know I'm aware of his play in Boston, but like I'm not in the room and I'm not there talking to I don't know what he's like around the other players, but it's not good enough. And it starts with him. Certainly his play is influenced to a degree from the defenseman, and then you can carry that out to the forward group. But, they need to help him out more. Absolutely. But you also need a better outing from your goaltender. And I think Forsberg has to be part of that equation. Now, I think as a backup, he hasn't been terrible, obviously.
He's been better than last season.
Correct. So I just think right now, as a whole, and not to deviate too far from the goalie conversation, but I know the underlying numbers, their expected goals, they're 9th in the NHL, I think, as of December 1st, right? Like up until December 1st. So, but again, those are expected goals that they're not putting them in the net. So I love using the underlying numbers. I've warmed up a lot to them. A lot. Analytics are certainly a part of how I come up with my talking points. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, what are we doing here? And I think if you're a player in that lineup, there has to be an amount of pride that translates into your play. And when I say pride, it's passion, it's extra effort on those puck battles. And I'm not seeing it right now. It just seems like every other night they're flat, they're uninspired at times, and it's affecting their play.
2 last questions. Number one, the Pizza Line reunion is on Thursday night with Danny Heatley coming in with Jason Spezza and Danielle Alfredson. Number one, how do you feel about Heatley coming back? I have very mixed feelings on this. I don't, I know people like to blame the late owner for everything, but this had nothing to do with the late owner. This was a guy who made his own bid. 2-time 50-goal scorer. I think they're softening the blow by bringing him back with the other 2 guys. I just wonder what your thoughts are on that.
I think from an out, because you would have been way more involved, obviously with the Sens than I was when he was around. Clearly, I mean, I was still playing junior hockey, but I was watching. So I'll speak from a fan's perspective. That's where I can kind of hit on this. I think it's cool that he's coming back. I think there's been a sort of like I don't know, like an emptiness, just like a void that needs to be filled. Like he was rather an integral part for at least a couple seasons during some of those very notable years for the Ottawa Senators. That's just a fact. And having him come back in now, And, whether you want to call it honoring him or whatever, just the fact that he's coming in with the rest of them, Spez is going to be back here. Obviously, we know Alfie's already here, but
Yeah.
I think it's cool. There's a nostalgic angle to it that I think a lot of fans can relate to, particularly millennials and older, people that were around and watched him play. So forgetting about the off-ice stuff and forgetting about how you feel about him and his relationships with any given person in the organization at any point, if you look at it objectively from a fan's point of view, I think it's fantastic. I think it's good PR for the team because it's an opportunity for the group, for the team to get a little bit of closure here, Bruce. I think that,
good point.
that would be my only angle is the closure, right? Like he's sort of been
I've said if Vince Carter can go back to Toronto, he can come back to Ottawa.
Exactly. That's where I'm at with it.
And finally, look, you and I you do junior games in the spring. It's closer to the playoffs on TSN, but and you and I probably haven't watched any junior hockey so far this season. But Carter Yakimchuk was passed up for Canada's World Junior Team. The Senators aren't happy about it. Travis Green said that he'd be surprised. He's kind of surprised there are 10 better defensemen in Canada than Carter Yakimchuk. Just this is going to be dumb of me to say, okay? But Ottawa fans are going to buy tickets to this tournament when it's at the Canadian Tire Center. I think they could have been thrown a bone by having a Senators draft pick, at least at training camp. Just wonder what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah,
I'm in camp.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Bruce. And I'm usually a bit of a contrarian when everyone's sort of following a narrative, and I try to find a hole in it. But I can't find it right now. I don't know what the logic is here particularly, other than I know Hockey Canada does follow a bit of a formula, and they've got ways. You can't have a bunch of strictly offensive defensemen.
Oh no, I know,
and I understand that too. But I liked his two-way game, at least in training camp. Sure, can he improve a little bit defensively if you're really trying to nitpick certain parts of his game? Yeah, okay. But he's on pace for another 30 goals this year. I just. Factor that in, and you factor in his skating isn't bad. It's obviously very much up to par at least NHL standards go. And defensively, again, as I mentioned, okay. But I think you're right. From a fan's point of view, if you're hosting the World Juniors here and you've got an absolute stud that you easily could have made an argument that he would have at least played maybe 9 games to start the season. He certainly deserved it. He was leading the team in points in training camp at the NHL level. So I was very much looking forward to his play. I don't watch enough junior during the season. I'll be honest. I don't give a shit. Yeah. I don't pay attention to it. I care about the NHL. I don't care about Belleville. I care about the National Hockey League. However, and the reason why I say all that is not to be bombastic. I think there are a lot of analysts out there that lie to themselves when they say that they're following the CHL. They're not following the CHL. There's too many teams to follow. So let's just get that out of the way. But Yakimchuk was terrific in training camp. That was about the end of how much I actually was exposed to him. I haven't followed him at all in Calgary, but based on what I saw, I am genuinely surprised. And I'm even more surprised he didn't get a call to the camp. So I think we can finish this off with Canada's going to be under the gun now, right? Like the pressure's on. So if they fail to deliver, it wasn't just Yakimchuk. There's some other notable omissions on that team.
4 or 5 guys in the top 9.
Yeah. So it's like, and I think my final point to that is these are guys that do very well under pressure. You've got a very short, high stress, high pressure, high stakes tournament. And you're omitting some of these guys that can produce in those sort of environments. So I'm curious to see what the logic was there. I'd love to see some statements from some of the managerial perspectives and just see what they have to say about it. But they're obviously going to back up their decision-making, but time will tell.
I appreciate your time today, Mark, and thanks for joining us here on the One-on-One with Bruce Garrioch. Marc Methot, TSN analyst, former NHL player, former Ottawa Senator. Thanks for your time. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Bruce.